Tell me who's like me. Do y'all lose like me? Well, hello there. Welcome to the library.
Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Welcome. Welcome to Dark Cheshire's Madcap fanfiction library. Grab a seat, a cup of tea, while I pull a story from the shelf. I love reading and creating stories so much that an ex-boyfriend says that one reason we broke up was because I'd rather read or write than spend time with him. I really did. Oh well, reading is my addiction in all its many forms. But what happens when you go swimming in those waters is that you find some strange fish. Infamous fanfiction stories and horror stories on subreddit, fanfiction.net, and more. I'm here to explore with you even further into the land of the odd, the weird, and the hilarious. So, this week I fell into the subreddit Library of Shadows that hosts all types of horror. And with writer Ardent Purpose, I found a delicious new horror story for you. Ready for a story to really mess with your brain? Here is Disquiet Mind. It's there again, in the corner. The darkness of the room failing to conceal its pale and small, serpentine body. Oh God, I could even see its face this time. I could see its 4 human-looking eyes staring back at me, holding my gaze. Its 2 mandibles clicked together and rubbed against one another like hands, almost like it was saying that this was going to be the night it finally gets to me. I dared to close my eyes and repeat my mantra that this was a terrible hallucination brought on by my mental illness. This was nothing more than a figment of my twisted imagination. I couldn't help seeing it, but I could help ignore and make it go away like the last 5 times. All I had to do was ignore it, and it would go away. I fell asleep that night, wrapped in a tight cocoon in my blanket, with my head in an awkward angle up under my pillow, and woke up with the blanket off and an immediate sore neck from sleeping on it wrong. I didn't let it stop me from looking in the corner of the room where the thing had been to see nothing. I looked under my bed for the irrational fear of last night gnawed away at my spine and worked its way back into my head like a catchy tune. When I was satisfied with my now rudimentary search of my room, I went about taking my medication and immediately felt the headaches start once again. The headaches always start once I take my medication, and that's been for the last 3.5 months. Nothing too fierce, but it was inconvenient nonetheless. When I went in for my monthly follow-ups, my provider reassured me that it was merely a minor side effect from the medication, but if it continued, I should let her know. Truth be told, I didn't care about the headaches. So long as it reduced the hallucinations and the intrusive voice in my head I heard to a bare minimum of whisper level. However, the headache today was unusually fierce, and it was enough to make me stumble into the bathroom and turn on the light and look at myself in the mirror. There was a single trickle of dark crimson leading down from my nose. I touched it, and it was caked. It must have happened in the night. Funny I didn't see it smeared on the pillow, but then again I wasn't thinking rationally. My provider said that my nose tended to dry. I finally finished eating your brain, the intrusive voice said in contempt, almost proudly and in such clarity that it terrified me to my core. Oh God, the medication wasn't working anymore. It was back in full volume. I immediately went to find my cell phone. They couldn't get my main provider in time to see me, so I had to see someone on call. A new doctor that didn't exactly know shit about my condition other than what was scribbled in the medical history. I tried to fight the distrust and paranoia and somewhat succeeded as I reminded myself how far I've come along since my troubled and traumatic childhood. I am not falling back into that dark and never-ending hole again. I am not going to succumb to my inner demons. I am not a magnet for monsters. As I waited for the new provider, I was astonished that the intrusive voice had been quiet. It usually taunted that it was eating my internal organs piece by piece. It was surreal to hear, and I've had my share of nightmares from what the voice said. The hallucinations never helped and only added fuel to the nightmarish and tortured thing I called a life. There was a knock on the room door before it opened, and who I presumed to be Dr. Burns came into the room with a laptop under his arm. "Hello, Faraday," he said with a kind voice and offered his hand. "Hello, Dr. Burns," I said as I took his hand in mine and shook it. "How are you feeling?" "Kind of frackin' terrified that my condition is acting up again. Kind of angry, too." "I'm just letting you know right now that you're in a safe place with the utmost care, Faraday," he said soothingly as he put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "We care about you and your well-being. The nurse said you also had a headache aside from the intrusive voice?" "Yes, it's worse than usual." "And these headaches start every time you take the new medication?" "Yes. I also had a bit of bleed run down from my nose sometime in the night, but Dr. Janice said that my nose tended to dry out every so often." "I see," Dr. Burns said before sitting down on a stool and opening his laptop. "You never had anything like this happen with the other medications you've taken?" "No." He typed away into his laptop for a moment before stopping and looking into my eyes, and for a terrible moment, it reminded me of the thing in the corner. "You ever have an X-ray or an MRI before?" he asked. "No. Before we go any further, we're going to do an X-ray of your head." "Are you sure? Dr. Janice..." "I'm not Dr. Janice, and I insist with this current predicament. Don't worry, X-rays are cheaper than MRIs and quicker. You'll be in and out just like that." "What makes you think I need an X-ray?" I asked slowly, as I started to feel an irrational fear crawl up my spine again. "The consistency of the headaches and nosebleeds are red flags for me, Faraday. I know it could be rationalized away, and I see that you're trying to do that. But I wouldn't feel right if I didn't at least get a peek inside your head to make sure everything was all right." "That is strange, although." "What's strange?" "That Dr. Janice never made a referral for an X-ray or an MRI at all. That is standard to make sure that what's causing your condition isn't a physical remedy." I slowly looked away as two realizations dawned on me. I can't even remember my first appointment with her or when the hallucinations started, I said as I tried to think, but not finding the ability to do so. "It is strange, but speculating will only get us so far. Come on, I'll lead you to radiology and then we'll see what's what." And then I felt the muscles in my neck spasm. "No." My voice spoke out on its own. My eyes immediately widened and I clasped my hands over my neck as I stared at Dr. Burns. "What was that, Faraday?" he asked in genuine concern. I don't know. I don't know," I said as my voice shook, my heart starting to pound. There was a knock on the door and then it opened soon after. Janice entered the room with 2 police officers following behind her. "It can't lock, so stand there and hold it," Janice instructed to one of the officers. "What is this?" Dr. Burns asked sternly as he stood up from his stool. "Sit the frack back down and you'll live, boy," the police officer with Janice said as he took out his firearm and a silencer before screwing it onto his gun. Dr. Burns stared at the gun for a long moment before it must have registered to him, and he sat down on the stool. I felt my neck muscles spasm again, and my voice spoke out on its own as I heard the intrusive voice also speak in my head in tandem. Finally. I clasped my neck again and shook my head violently as I shut my eyes. This was just a hallucination, A hand clasped my head, and I looked at Janice staring intently into my eyes. It's not a hallucination. None of it ever was, Faraday. If you want to know the truth. What truth? I spit out. She started to open her mouth as if to say something and stopped midway, and her lips curved into a soft smile. Janice let go of me and pulled off her lab coat, and then her shirt. What truth? This truth, she said, before her eyes rolled deep inside her head and her nose started to dribble blood. Beautiful, I heard one of the officers whisper as I stared at my nightmare coming true before my very fracking eyes. My nightmare that something had been living inside my body and eating away at me as I went about my day. My nightmare that I was slowly dying in both body and mind and losing my identity to something foreign beyond even the darkest imagination. Just as I had seen in my nightmare, as in my hallucinations, the thing from the corner of my room had made its appearance from behind Janice's head and poked through her long dark hair. Its 4 human-looking eyes stared intently at me. I felt my neck muscles spasm, and it stopped me from screaming to God Almighty for help. It even made my body go stiff upright, inattention to the visage. But it couldn't stop the tears streaming down my face. The serpentine thing recoiled back inside Janice's body, and she shuddered before her eyes rolled back into place, and she wiped at the blood for a moment before tasting it. You can't make this go away. My lover has to live inside your body now. If I'm right, you don't have a brain anymore. My head forcefully nodded, and my neck muscles spasmed to control any protest. Your body will die if my lover leaves you, but your soul will live on inside him in a grueling hell unlike anything you could fathom. You'll still be conscious to experience everything and see the world through his eyes. I'm telling you this because you need to make a choice. Do you understand? I didn't feel any of the forced muscle contractions that raped my body into its bidding, and for that I actually felt a relief tide over me. But it was short-lived, as I heard the question again somewhere in my mania. My poor, abused mind trying to understand what happened and how it happened, but finding no answers but only one. I understand, I mourned pitifully as I stared down in despair. Look me in my eyes and say that. I gritted my teeth and shook my head, and was immediately rewarded with an entire body spasm as my head was forced to look up at her. My vocal cords were played like a flute as my voice repeated it. The thing puppeteering Janice's body made her arm come up, and her hand caressed my cheek tenderly. The medication worked like steroids. I'll make note. She quickly turned her head to the struggle unfolding behind her and caught a bullet between her eyes as the officer's gun went off. Dr. Burns had fought against the officer and managed to grapple his firearm away from him with a shove and shot at Janice before shooting the officer guarding the door. Blood and pieces of brain and skull spattered across the door in a spray of gore, and Dr. Burns immediately shot the officer on the floor until the gun clicked empty. My entire body spasmed and went stiff, locking me in place and making me unable to help him. My neck muscles stopping me from screaming out for help. I looked over from the corner of my eye to see Janice holding her face and stumbling before looking at Burns and silently pleading with him to run, goddammit, run. In that brief instant we locked eyes. I had never seen more pain, horror on a person's face in my entire life. I'm so sorry, he screamed before turning and running out of the room. I heard him scream at the top of his lungs for help. My entire body spasmed once again, and I shot up off the bed like a bullet and went to Janice as blood dripped from between her hands. No time. Run. The thing controlling her screamed. No. The thing controlling me screamed back. The Janus thing collapsed against the floor and screamed again. Run now. Tears streamed forcefully down my face on their own accord. I love you, the thing controlling my body said with pain I could feel. My body pushed itself towards out into the hall. Everyone was staring, and I could now start to feel the thing's thoughts start to become my own. Exposed, terrified, death. The death of Faraday was growing complete with every passing minute, and the transformation into something else was inevitable. One of the last few human thoughts I could conjure up was the faint hope that Dr. Burns would be believed. Dr. Burns would find a solution. But another part realized it was nothing more than that. Faint hope. The police were involved. He would get questioned, and he would go home at some point, and either the transformation will happen to him too, or they'll kill him outright, if he was believed at all. If things turn out. If things. Oh my gosh. Things invading the body and taking control. Pod people are another level of freaking me out. I mean, how can you know? How can you know who's a pod person? Anyways, please like and subscribe if you liked the video, and make sure to follow me down the rabbit hole on Twitter, Instagram, or Discord. Links are below. Can't wait for another week. I may need a stronger tea just to make it through. But hey, we're already mad here. Let's go even crazier. Talk to you later, alley cats. Meow.